Aaron never planned to find anything exotic in the woods behind Outpost 12. He mostly went there to argue with squirrels and avoid his neighbors, one of whom had welded a hot tub to the roof of his trailer and claimed it filtered cosmic rays. So when his boots squelched into a patch of moss that blinked at him, yes, blinked, he paused. Not because he was scared, but because blinking moss usually meant one of two things: a mutated fungus colony or something worse. Something groaned. He parted the hanging ferns cautiously, half expecting a bear or a very angry raccoon. Instead, he saw legs, then arms, then blue skin. She was lying curled up on her side like a question mark, wrapped in strands of something that looked like semi-organic armor. It shimmered faintly, pulsing in colors he couldn't name, like a mood ring crossed with a warship. She was bleeding from one side, her breathing ragged, her face twisted in pain. Or maybe she just didn't like the smell of moss. Fair enough. Aaron crouched, heart thudding. He'd seen a lot since the collapse. Rogue mechs, roaming exiles, that one guy who insisted he could summon rain with interpretive dance. But this was new. He reached out. She flinched and hissed in a language that sounded like a blender arguing with itself. Hey, relax, he whispered. I'm not here to dissect you or sell you to a galactic zoo, though I admit they'd pay a lot if you have tentacles. She didn't laugh. Tough crowd. Okay, plan B, he muttered, sliding his arms under her carefully. She was lighter than expected. Either that, or he was getting stronger from all those soup cans he kept hauling up the hill. Her body trembled, a low-frequency vibration like a thruster on idle. As he lifted her, her head lolled onto his shoulder, and she whispered something that might have been obliterate, hydrate, or possibly don't wrinkle the cape. Back at his shack, which was technically a repurposed shuttle module with personality issues, he laid her out on the only bed, kicked aside a pile of data slates, and barked a command at the med unit. The unit responded with a dignified beep, promptly ejected a puff of expired healing gel, and burst into static. Fantastic, Aaron sighed, wiping alien blood off his shirt. She's probably royalty, and I just treated her with bubblegum-scented antiseptic from 23 years ago. The alien girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to glare at him. Yep, definitely royalty. That glare could curdle milk. Hi, he said, smiling with all the charm of someone who hadn't combed his hair in 2 weeks. I'm Aaron. Welcome to the galaxy's least secure safe house. Would you like tea, painkillers, or a blanket woven from sarcasm and bad decisions? She blinked once, then passed out again. Aaron sighed, pulled up a chair beside the cot, and set to work cleaning her armor, which seemed to fix itself when he wasn't looking. Self-healing. Naturally. He tried not to think too hard about the ships that had flown over the ridge last night, the way his comms were suddenly full of static, or the shimmering line of satellites now blinking like paparazzi on the far horizon. Because whoever she wasn't just another crash survivor, and somehow he just brought her into the worst hiding spot in the entire quadrant. By morning, she was sitting up in bed like she hadn't almost died 12 hours ago. Aaron, who had just stubbed his toe for the 3rd time that morning and spilled protein powder into his coffee, wasn't sure how to process that, especially not while watching her levitate a spoon. Okay, he said, rubbing his temples. Either I'm hallucinating or my cutlery just performed a gravity-defying ballet. She didn't respond, just kept staring at him with those shimmering, too large eyes. Her gaze carried the weight of someone who'd seen the inside of a dying star, or someone deeply unimpressed with his t-shirt, which read, "Don't panic unless I do." Right. Breakfast, Aaron said, pulling open a cabinet and retrieving 2 ration packs and something that claimed to be sausage, but looked suspiciously like polymer tubing. So, what do you eat? Please don't say souls. She tilted her head. Carbon-based nourishment will suffice. Ah, excellent. Me too. Though I draw the line at anything with more legs than me. She accepted the ration bar with the wariness of a diplomat being offered a ticking gift. One cautious nibble later, she made a face like she'd bitten into sadness itself. Delightful, she muttered. You know, sarcasm's a pretty advanced concept for someone who speaks in cosmic metaphors. I learned it from the educational archives of your planet. Aaron raised an eyebrow. You watched sitcoms, didn't you? I studied Friends and a significant volume of something called SpongeBob. Great, he said. The fate of the galaxy rests in the hands of someone who thinks living in a pineapple is a viable lifestyle. They spent the rest of the morning in what could only be described as mutual confusion. She explored his shack, poked every blinking device, and accidentally turned his coffee maker into a miniature warp drive. It now brewed coffee in 1 second, but occasionally screamed during the process. Can you fix that? He asked, watching it vibrate dangerously on the counter. It is more efficient this way. Yeah, but it also sounds like it's summoning demons. She ignored him and focused instead on the solar node embedded in his floor, where her fingers glowed faintly as she touched it. You've been drawing energy, he said. That's why the lights flicker every time you blink. I have needed time to mend. Mend what exactly? A paper cut? A fractured space throne? Her silence told him everything and nothing all at once. Later that day, she followed him into the nearby glade, barefoot, walking like the ground owed her something. She bent beside a glowing root and whispered a word he couldn't understand. The plant straightened, shimmered, and pulsed with new light. Aaron blinked. Did you just photosynthesize on command? She stood, brushing moss from her legs. The flora here is responsive to harmonic commands. Crude but serviceable. Crude? Lady, that moss has been growing undisturbed since my uncle tried to start a biodiesel experiment. He's still glowing, by the way. That evening, as the twin moons rose, one white, one burnt orange, he found her on the roof, cross-legged, eyes closed, lips moving in soft syllables that didn't belong to this world. You praying? He asked, climbing up with 2 mugs of something almost like tea. Synchronizing. Cool. I usually just nap. She took the mug, smelled it, and gave him a look. This smells like melted tires. Accurate, but it grows on you, like guilt or ska music. For a long while, they said nothing. The wind hummed. The stars blinked. Somewhere in the forest, a creature made a sound like a kazoo being strangled. You saved me, she said finally, not looking at him. He shrugged. Well, technically, I dragged you into a shack and applied gel from a decade-old medkit. So, yeah, hero stuff. I owe you. Good, he said. You can start by helping me stop the toaster from sending distress beacons. She laughed then, soft and strange. And in that moment, Aaron realized something deeply unsettling. He didn't want her to leave. The third drone came just before breakfast, and Aaron knew it wasn't a coincidence anymore. The first one he'd chalked up to a misdirected delivery bot. The second, maybe a lost survey unit. But the third hovered outside his compost tank, scanned his mushrooms with a red beam, and tried to abduct his shovel. Zephyr vaporized it mid-hover with a pulse from 2 fingers. That's not normal, Aaron muttered, peeking from behind the stack of emergency toilet paper he'd barricaded himself with. They've found me, she said calmly, lowering her hand. Or rather, they found the probability of me. Right, of course. Probability, because it wouldn't be fun if they just used a tracking device like everyone else. Zephyr turned and gave him that look, the one that felt like being studied by a sentient glacier. They're using quantum drift arrays. Probability scanning isn't exact. Yet. But they're narrowing it. I was really hoping the phrase quantum drift arrays wouldn't be in my vocabulary before lunch, Aaron said. Now I'm going to choke on my sandwich just thinking about it. The air around her crackled slightly as she moved, like static wrapped in silk. She stood still in the middle of his cluttered shack, eyes closed, listening to something only she could hear. Aaron stood very still too, mostly because her hair had just started glowing again, and last time it did that, the fridge tried to upload itself. I must accelerate my restoration, she murmured. Does that mean more humming on the roof, or are you going to eat the toaster this time? I require full neural lattice reconstruction. I need a vessel. Well, we've got a bathtub, a rusty exosuit, and a blender that speaks 5 languages. Take your pick. She walked over to his workbench, picked up a handful of copper wiring, and began braiding it with eerie precision. The strands wove into a spiral, then into a shape that hovered for a moment before collapsing back into her palm. Aaron stared. So, knitting, but with physics? constructing a memory link anchor. Sounds fancy. Does it come in black? She sat cross-legged on the floor, already halfway inside her trance. Aaron sighed and set about reinforcing the perimeter with what little tech he had. His defenses were, in a word, embarrassing. A motion sensor made from an old camera. A perimeter alarm wired to a modified coffee grinder. He tried his best not to look at Zephyr's floating circuits and wonder which of them would explode if she sneezed. By evening, the sky had darkened unnaturally, and 2 more drones passed overhead. Zephyr didn't move. She was glowing brighter now, her hands resting on her knees, her armor pulsing faintly as it regenerated cell by cell. Aaron decided to do what he did best during moments of mortal danger: make soup. He walked in with a steaming bowl and set it near her silently, trying not to disrupt the delicate alien light show. She opened one eye. It smells like regret. Close. It's actually lentils. They sat like that for a while. Soup, stars, a queen sinking with her forgotten self. Then softly she spoke. When this is done, I'll have to return. He nodded, staring into his mug. Yeah, I figured. Royalty and all that. Galactic throne, interstellar obligations, weird chairs that hover. I get it. She hesitated. I would not have survived without you. Well, I wouldn't have survived without that coffee plant in the corner. So we're even. Number, you need to understand. My people, they'll demand answers. Loyalty, tradition. Aaron looked up at her slowly. And what are you going to give them? She didn't answer, but her hand lingered on the bowl he'd brought her. Outside, the stars kept blinking. But inside that tiny shack, something quieter and stronger than fear was beginning to settle. Something warm, and incredibly stupid, and completely unstoppable. The shack's floor didn't usually open on its own. That morning it did, with a low, humming clank that sent Aaron tumbling out of bed, armed with nothing but a frying pan and an overly dramatic yell. Zephyr stood in the center of the room, completely calm, while the metal panels beneath her feet folded inward, like flower petals revealing a spaceship. Not a ship, actually. A throne chamber disguised as a cargo hold, beneath his home, beneath his laundry pile. That was under my socks? Zephyr didn't respond right away. She was busy levitating a circular interface into place with one hand, while tuning an alien frequency with the other. Holographic constellations spun around her head, some of which Aaron suspected didn't actually exist in this dimension. He squinted. Hey, are those moons labeled maybe, indefinitely don't? They are memory indicators. I've reconnected to the outer neural branches of the fleet, she said without looking up. We can speak with them now. We? Yes, you are my strategic advisor. He blinked. I thought I was your emergency soup guy. Zephyr pointed at a hovering glyph that pulsed red. This symbol means trusted inner circle. You've been added. Aaron stared at the glyph. It looked suspiciously like a potato. So I'm now part of an alien war council because I brought you lentils? They were acceptable. The first transmission came moments later, a sea of unfamiliar voices rippling through the air. Some barked formal greetings, some questioned the nature of her delay. One sounded like they were sobbing through a keyboard. A translucent admiral flickered into view above the console, dressed in ceremonial armor and wielding enough disdain to make Iran's spine itch. My queen, your signal re-emergence is unexpected, the admiral said. Zephyr stood taller. I am alive, in healing. I will return soon. And the creature beside you? Aaron raised a hand. Hi, I'm Aaron. I fix toasters. The admiral blinked twice. He is essential, Zephyr said flatly. Of course, the admiral muttered, sounding like he'd just been told to knight a houseplant. Once the transmissions ended, Zephyr slumped slightly, rubbing the edge of her forehead. Aaron handed her a cup of synthetic tea with exactly one marshmallow in it. She accepted it like it was an offering from a distant temple. You sure they're ready to see you? He asked. They'll adjust. And what about me? You may need to wear something more intimidating. I have a leather jacket and one of those rubber dinosaur masks. She considered. Acceptable. That afternoon, the ship beneath the shack hummed with life. Power surged, systems aligned, Alien tech began syncing with Iran's pathetic satellite dish, which now receives 73 new channels, most of which involve very aggressive cooking competitions. Zephyr trained in the clearing, her body now fully healed, her movements precise and impossible to follow. Aaron watched from a distance while chewing on a protein bar that tasted vaguely of pencil shavings. "Is this the part where I learn to fight?" he asked. "No," she replied. "This is the part where you survive while I fight." "Oh, good, so the usual." When the sun dipped below the ridgeline, a final ping echoed through the ship. Confirmation. The royal fleet was en route. Zephyr stood by the hatch, silent, unreadable. Aaron joined her, still holding his now cold tea. "You don't have to go alone, you know," he said. "I mean, I don't know much about thrones or galaxies or proper dinner etiquette, but I make excellent small talk and mediocre sandwiches." Zephyr turned to him, her face unreadable for a heartbeat. Then she smiled. "Then stand beside me, Aaron of the Forest Shack." "Right," he said. "Just let me grab my dinosaur mask." The ship broke through the clouds like a blade of silver light, silent and massive, casting a ripple across the treetops. Aaron squinted up at it from his usual spot, balancing on a crate, holding a thermos, wearing his rubber dinosaur mask. Zephyr stood beside him, regal and composed, her armor gleaming with just the right amount of terrifying. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice slightly muffled by plastic teeth. She nodded. "It's time." "Okay, just checking. Because that thing looks like it eats planets for breakfast." "It does not. Only moons." "Ah, great." The ramp extended slowly, a soft glow lining its edges. Inside, waiting in formation, were rows of armored figures. Some knelt. Some stood. All stared in silence as the queen they had thought dead returned, alongside a scruffy human who still had lentil stains on his sleeves. Zephyr stepped forward, head high, steps fluid and certain. Aaron followed 2 paces behind, trying not to trip over his own dignity. A tall alien with silver markings on her face approached. "My queen," she said, bowing. "The sectors await your command." Zephyr's voice was calm. "We begin the unification immediately. No purges, no declarations of vengeance. The cycle ends now." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. The admiral from earlier appeared via projection again, grim as ever. "You would have us offer mercy?" Zephyr turned slightly, eyes flashing. "Yes, mercy, and structure, and one really good human soup recipe." Aaron gave a tiny wave. "It's mostly salt and blind faith." The projection flickered. The admiral did not smile, but he didn't argue either. Over the next few hours, Aaron found himself in rooms he had no business being in. War rooms, memory archives, a corridor that may have been alive and humming lullabies. He sat in councils where people with 5 brains debated policy while he sipped bad alien coffee and offered the occasional shrug of universal wisdom. "Maybe don't vaporize anyone before lunch," he suggested once. It became policy. Zephyr was different now, more than the queen she had remembered. She moved with purpose, but also with something else. Ease, humor even. Once, in the middle of a tense negotiation, she slid a sarcastic remark to him through their shared communication. "If this fails, I'm blaming your soup," he replied with a doodle of a frowning spoon. She laughed. As days passed, the Forest Shack became a legend. They didn't tear it down. They built around it. A living monument with vines and tech woven together. The place where the queen had been saved. The place where everything changed. Aaron stood one night beneath its still flickering lights, alone, watching the stars. Zephyr stepped up beside him. No guards, no titles. Just her. They stood in silence, listening to the gentle hum of distant engines. "You could stay," she said. "I could," he replied. "But I've got, mushrooms. And I'm pretty sure the toaster is still plotting something." She smiled. "We could relocate the mushrooms. And the toaster." He looked at her, then at the stars, then back. "Well, if you're offering me a galactic position that includes breakfast and not dying horribly, I suppose I could consider it." She leaned closer. "Advisor of soup and chaos." "Sounds like me." In time, the galaxy stabilized. The fleet unified. The council adapted. And somewhere in the vastness of space, aboard a flagship with an herb garden and an onboard AI that told bedtime stories, a former forest recluse gave weekly advice to people who once thought Earth was a myth. And every now and then, when the stars were calm and the universe quieted down, a queen and her ridiculous human would sit by the window with mugs in hand, quietly arguing over whether lentils should ever be used in interstellar diplomacy. Peace, it turned out, had a strange sense of humor, but it tasted pretty good.